The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the lace curtains of Rosa Martinez's modest home in Phoenix, Arizona, but 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez remained huddled in the darkest corner of the living room, as if light itself had become her enemy. Her tiny frame was curled into a protective ball, knees drawn up to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around a tattered teddy bear that had seen better days. The stuffed animal's left ear hung by a single thread, a casualty from that horrific night 2 weeks ago when her world had shattered into a million pieces. Emma's once bright brown eyes, which used to sparkle with mischief and wonder, now stared blankly at the faded floral wallpaper. She hadn't spoken a single word since that terrible evening when the screaming started, when the furniture crashed, when her mother's cries echoed through their small apartment like a wounded animal's final plea. The little girl who used to chatter endlessly about butterflies, ice cream, and her favorite cartoon characters had retreated so deep into silence that even her beloved Abuela Rosa wondered if they'd lost her forever. Detective Sarah Martinez had been working with the Phoenix Police Department's Special Victims Unit for 12 years, but she'd never encountered a case quite like this one. She sat across from Emma in Rosa's cramped living room, her notepad balanced carefully on her knees, trying to project an aura of calm despite the urgency gnawing at her insides. Time was running out. Marcus Rivera, the monster who had nearly killed Emma's mother Maria, was scheduled to appear before the judge for a bail hearing in just 3 days. Without Emma's testimony, their case against him was built on nothing more than circumstantial evidence and Maria's fragmented memories, which Rivera's high-powered attorney was already working to discredit. "Emma, sweetheart," Detective Martinez whispered, her voice barely audible above the ticking of Rosa's ancient grandfather clock. "I know you're scared, baby girl, but your mommy needs you to be brave right now." She leaned forward slightly, careful not to invade the child's carefully constructed fortress of solitude. "Can you tell me what happened that night? Just between you and me?" Emma's response was the same as it had been for 14 agonizing days. Absolute, devastating silence. Her grip on the teddy bear tightened imperceptibly, the only indication that she'd even heard the detective's gentle plea. Rosa watched from the kitchen doorway, her weathered hands twisted in her apron, tears streaming down her cheeks as she witnessed her granddaughter's continued retreat from the world. The case. Facts were brutal and clear-cut, at least to the adults involved. Marcus Rivera had been dating Maria Rodriguez for 8 months, a relationship that had quickly escalated from romantic dinners to controlling behavior, from sweet text messages to violent outbursts. Maria had tried to break up with him twice, but Rivera's charm offensive always won her back, complete with expensive gifts, tearful apologies, and promises that he'd changed. The night of the attack, Maria had finally found the courage to tell Rivera their relationship was over for good. She'd asked him to return her apartment key and leave her and Emma alone. Rivera's response had been swift and merciless. He'd grabbed Maria by the throat, slammed her against the kitchen wall, and proceeded to beat her with his fists, while 3-year-old Emma watched in horror from her hiding place behind the living room sofa. The attack had lasted less than 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes had resulted in Maria's hospitalization with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and psychological trauma that would take years to heal. More devastating still was the trauma inflicted on Emma, whose innocent eyes had witnessed every horrifying second of her mother's brutal assault. When neighbors finally called police after hearing the screaming, they'd found Maria unconscious on the kitchen floor and Emma catatonic behind the couch, clutching her teddy bear and staring at nothing. Rivera had fled the scene, but police arrested him 6 hours later at his brother's house, his knuckles still bloody and swollen from the attack. He'd been charged with aggravated assault, domestic violence, and child endangerment. But his expensive lawyer was already spinning a spinning narrative of self-defense and mutual combat. Detective Martinez shifted in her chair, studying Emma's pale face for any sign of recognition or response. She'd worked with traumatized children before, but Emma's complete withdrawal was unlike anything in her experience. Child psychologists had warned her that forcing the issue could cause even more psychological damage. But without Emma's eyewitness account, Rivera might walk free on a technicality. The thought of that monster returning to terrorize Maria and Emma again made Martinez's stomach churn with rage and helplessness. "Emma," she tried again, her voice even softer than before. "Your mommy is getting better every day. She's been asking about you, wanting to know if you're eating your vegetables and brushing your teeth." A slight twitch of Emma's eyelid suggested she was listening, even if she couldn't respond. "She told me to tell you that she loves you more than all the stars in the sky, and she's so proud of what a brave little girl you are." But Emma remained locked in her prison of silence, her tiny body trembling slightly as if the mere mention of that night was enough to send shockwaves through her nervous system. The teddy bear, named Mr. Buttons according to Rosa, had become her only companion, the sole witness to her whispered nightmares, and the repository of all her fears. Even Rosa, who had raised 6 children of her own, felt helpless in the face of such profound trauma. As Detective Martinez prepared to leave for another day of fruitless questioning, she noticed something that would change everything. Emma's head turned slightly toward the window, where a golden retriever was playing fetch with a young boy in the yard next door. For just a moment, the smallest spark of interest flickered in those haunted brown eyes. That spark would soon become the key to unlocking Emma's voice and bringing a monster to justice. Officer Jake Thompson had been working with therapy animals for 7 years, but he'd never felt more nervous about an introduction than he did standing outside Rosa Martinez's front door a crisp Thursday morning. Beside him sat Bella, a 4-year-old golden retriever whose gentle amber eyes and intuitive nature had already transformed dozens of lives throughout the Phoenix court system. Her thick, honey-colored coat gleamed in the morning sunlight, and her tail wagged with barely contained excitement, as if she somehow understood the importance of this moment. Thompson had received the desperate call from Detective Martinez the previous evening. "Jake, I've got a 3-year-old who witnessed her mother's brutal assault, and she hasn't spoken a word in 2 weeks," Sarah had explained, her voice thick with frustration and concern. "The perpetrator's bail hearing is tomorrow, and without this kid's testimony, he walks free. I know it's a long shot, but I saw her react to a dog through the window. Maybe Bella can reach her where we've all failed." As Thompson adjusted Bella's special blue vest, marked Therapy Dog, in bold white letters, he reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. Bella hadn't started life as a courthouse hero. She'd been surrendered to the Maricopa County Animal Shelter at 18 months old by a family who claimed she was too energetic for their lifestyle. Thompson, who volunteered at the shelter on weekends, had immediately recognized something special in the young golden retriever's expressive eyes and gentle demeanor. After months of intensive training with renowned animal behaviorist Dr. Patricia Hendricks, Bella had earned her certification as a courthouse therapy dog, one of only 12 such animals in the entire state of Arizona. She'd learned to remain calm during emotional outbursts, to provide comfort without becoming overly excited, and most importantly, to sense when someone needed her healing presence. Her success rate with traumatized children was unprecedented, but Emma Rodriguez represented her most challenging case yet. Thompson knocked softly on the weathered wooden door, and within moments, Rosa appeared, her kind face etched with worry lines that seemed to have deepened overnight. "Officer Thompson?" she asked, her accented English colored by hope and desperation. "Detective Martinez said you might be able to help our Emma." "I'd like you to meet Bella," Thompson replied, stepping aside to reveal the golden retriever sitting perfectly still beside him, her intelligent eyes already scanning the interior of the house as if searching for the child who needed her help. She's very special, Mrs. Martinez. She has a gift for connecting with children who've experienced trauma. Rosa's hands flew to her heart as she knelt down to Bella's level. The dog remained perfectly still, allowing the elderly woman to stroke her soft fur while maintaining focus on her primary mission. "She's beautiful," Rosa whispered, then looked up at Thompson with tears in her eyes. "Emma hasn't moved from her corner in 3 days. She won't eat, won't sleep in her bed. I'm so afraid we're losing her forever." Thompson nodded with understanding. He'd seen this level of trauma-induced withdrawal before, though rarely in someone so young. "Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that Bella has worked with over 60 children in similar situations. She seems to understand their pain in ways that even trained professionals sometimes can't. May we come in?" As they entered the modest living room, Thompson immediately spotted Emma in her familiar corner, still clutching the tattered teddy bear, her small body seeming even more fragile in the morning light. Detective Martinez sat across from her, looking exhausted and defeated after another sleepless night worrying about the case. "Emma, sweetheart," Rosa called gently, "we have a very special visitor who's come to meet you." For the first time in days, Emma's head turned slightly, though she kept her gaze fixed firmly on the floor. Thompson had coached Bella extensively on this type of introduction. No sudden movements, no overwhelming displays of affection, just patient, quiet presence that would allow the child to make the first move. "Emma," Thompson said in barely more than a whisper, "this is my friend Bella. She's a very good listener, and she loves children very much. She was wondering if she could sit near you, not too close, just where you could see her if you wanted to look." Without waiting for Thompson's command, Bella slowly lowered herself to the floor, about 6 feet away from Emma's corner, instinctively understanding the perfect distance close enough to be noticed, far enough away to not feel threatening. She rested her chin on her front paws and simply waited, her amber eyes soft with patience and compassion. The silence in the room was profound, broken only by the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock and Bella's quiet breathing. "Detective." Martinez held her breath, Rosa clutched her rosary, and Thompson watched with professional interest as his four-legged partner worked her magic. Minutes passed with no visible reaction from Emma, but Bella remained perfectly still, radiating calm energy into the tense atmosphere. Then, almost imperceptibly, Emma's death grip on her teddy bear began to loosen. Her dark eyes, which had been fixed on the same spot on the carpet for weeks, slowly tracked upward until they met Bella's gentle gaze. The golden retriever's tail gave the faintest wag, not the enthusiastic greeting she might offer other children, but a subtle acknowledgement that said, "I see you, I understand your pain, and I'm here whenever you're ready." Emma's lips parted, slightly, as if she were about to speak, but no words came. Instead, something even more remarkable happened. For the first time since the attack, tears began to flow down her cheeks, not the silent tears of terror she'd shed in her nightmares, but the cleansing tears of a child beginning to release the unbearable weight she'd been carrying alone. Bella's ears perked up slightly, and without breaking eye contact with Emma, she began to inch forward across the carpet, moving so slowly that her progress was almost imperceptible. Each movement was deliberate and careful, allowing Emma to process and accept her approach without feeling overwhelmed or cornered. The breakthrough moment came when Emma's tiny hand reached out from her protective cocoon and touched the air between them, as if testing whether Bella was real or just another figment of her traumatized imagination. Bella stretched her neck forward just enough to allow Emma's fingertips to graze her soft nose, and in that instant of connection, something magical began to heal in both their hearts. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but rather unfolded like a delicate flower blooming after a harsh winter. For 3 days following Bella's introduction, Emma remained in her corner, but now her dark eyes followed the golden retrievers, every movement with an intensity that gave everyone hope. Bella had become a permanent fixture in Rosa's living room, sleeping on a soft blue blanket that Officer Thompson had brought specifically for her. Positioned strategically where Emma could see her at all times, Dr. Rebecca Chun, the child psychologist, who had been assigned to Emma's case, arrived for their 4th session, carrying a bag of carefully selected toys and therapeutic materials. A woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and infinite patience, Dr. Chun specialized in trauma recovery for young children. She'd worked with victims of abuse, natural disasters, and family violence, but Emma's complete withdrawal had challenged even her extensive experience. "Good morning, Emma," Dr. Chun said softly as she settled onto the carpet near Bella, who had learned to serve as an emotional bridge between the traumatized child and the adults trying to help her. "I brought some new crayons today. I thought maybe you and Bella might like to help me color a picture." Emma's response was subtle but significant. Instead of turning away as she had during previous sessions, she kept her eyes focused on Dr. Chun's movements as the psychologist spread out a large sheet of paper decorated with simple outlines of flowers and butterflies. Bella, as if sensing the importance of the moment, rose gracefully from her blanket and padded over to lie down beside the paper, her presence creating a safe buffer zone that allowed Emma to observe without feeling pressured to participate. "Bella loves butterflies," Dr. Chun continued conversationally, selecting a yellow crayon and beginning to color one of the delicate wings. "She told me yesterday that yellow is her favorite color because it reminds her of sunshine and happy days." It was a therapeutic technique she'd perfected over the years. Attributing feelings and thoughts to the therapy animal allowed children to express their own emotions without the vulnerability of direct admission. For the first time in 3 weeks, Emma shifted position. It was barely noticeable, a slight uncurling of her legs, a loosening of her grip on Mr. Buttons, but Dr. Chun caught the movement and felt her heart skip with anticipation. Bella, with her uncanny sensitivity to human emotion, immediately lifted her head and looked directly at Emma, her tail giving the faintest encouraging wag. "Emma, sweetheart," Rosa called gently from the kitchen doorway, where she'd been watching with barely contained hope. "Would you like some apple juice?" "Bella looks thirsty too." The mention of Bella's needs seemed to penetrate Emma's protective shell in a way that concern for her own well-being couldn't. Emma's eyes darted between her grandmother and the golden retriever, and then something remarkable happened. She unwrapped one arm from around her teddy bear and pointed toward the kitchen, her first purposeful gesture since the attack. Dr. Chun exchanged a meaningful glance with Officer Thompson, who had remained quietly present throughout the session. This was exactly the kind of breakthrough they'd been hoping for. Emma's protective instincts toward Bella were beginning to override her own trauma-induced paralysis. When Rosa returned with 2 cups of apple juice, she set one down near Dr. Chun and another closer to Emma's corner. But instead of the usual rejection, Emma slowly began to uncurl from her protective position, moving with deliberate care, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile courage she was mustering. She crawled across the carpet toward Bella. The room fell silent, except for the soft whisper of Emma's pajamas against the carpet. Bella remained perfectly still, allowing the child to approach at her own pace. When Emma reached her, she didn't immediately reach for the juice cup. Instead, she did something that brought tears to every adult eye in the room. She gently placed her cup next to Bella's nose, as if offering the golden retriever the first drink. "Thank you, Emma," Dr. Chun whispered, her professional composure barely containing her emotion. "It's very kind of you to share with Bella. She appreciates thoughtful friends." Emma settled cross-legged beside Bella, closer to another person than she'd been since the night of the attack. As Bella carefully lapped at the apple juice, Emma's small hand began to stroke the dog's silky fur with reverent gentleness. Rhythmic motion seemed to calm something deep within her traumatized psyche. Then, in a voice so soft it was barely audible, Emma spoke her first word in 21 days. Bella. The single word hung in the air like a miracle, carrying with it all the hope and healing that everyone in the room had been praying for. Dr. Chun felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Rosa pressed her hands to her heart in gratitude, and Officer Thompson blinked rapidly to maintain his professional composure. But Emma wasn't finished. As if speaking Bella's name had unlocked a door that had been sealed shut by trauma, she continued in that same whisper-soft voice. Pretty Bella. Nice doggy. Bella, with the intuition that made her such an exceptional therapy animal, gently rested her head against Emma's leg, providing warm, comforting contact that seemed to ground the child in the present moment rather, and the terrifying memories that had held her captive. Over the next hour, Emma's vocabulary gradually expanded. She told Bella about Mr. Buttons, pointing out his torn ear and explaining that he was hurt too. She shared that her favorite color was purple, that she liked pancakes, and that she missed her mommy. Each word was a small victory, each sentence a step further away from the darkness that had consumed her. The most significant moment came when Dr. Chun gently guided the conversation toward the night of the attack. Emma, she said carefully, sometimes when scary things happen, it helps to tell Bella about them. She's very good at keeping secrets. Safe. Emma looked directly into Bella's amber eyes, as if drawing strength from their unwavering compassion. Then, in a voice that grew stronger with each word, she spoke the truth that would change everything. Bella, the bad man hurt my mommy. He was very angry and very mean. I was scared, but I hid behind the couch and watched. Mommy cried, and I wanted to help her, but I was too little. A breakthrough had finally come, and with Bella as her anchor to safety and courage, Emma was ready to begin her journey toward healing and justice. District Attorney Michael Foster had prosecuted over 200 domestic violence cases during his 15-year career, but none had ever kept him awake at night quite like this one. At 2:47 a.m., he sat in his downtown Phoenix office, surrounded by case files, legal precedents, and empty coffee cups, desperately searching for a way to ensure that Marcus Rivera would never again terrorize Maria Rodriguez and her daughter. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he reviewed Detective Martinez's latest report about Emma's breakthrough with Bella, feeling both elated by the progress and terrified by the unprecedented legal challenge it presented. The courtroom had never been designed for therapy animals. In fact, Arizona statute was frustratingly vague about accommodations for child witnesses beyond the standard closed-circuit television option, which Dr. Chun had already determined would be counterproductive for Emma's specific trauma. The 3-year-old had made it clear through her sessions that physical separation from Bella triggered immediate regression into her catatonic state. Foster rubbed his temples, knowing that Judge Patricia Williams would face intense scrutiny from the state appellate court if she allowed what Rivera's defense team was already calling a sympathetic sideshow designed to prejudice the jury. Margaret Sullivan, Rivera's defense attorney, was a formidable opponent with a reputation for exploiting legal technicalities to secure acquittals for her clients. A Harvard law graduate with silver hair and steel-gray eyes, Sullivan had already filed 3 motions challenging the admissibility of Emma's potential testimony, arguing that a 3-year-old's recollections were inherently unreliable and that the presence of a therapy dog would constitute inflammatory and prejudicial evidence designed to manipulate the emotions of the jury rather than establish facts. Foster's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Martinez. Emma talked for 2 hours today. She's ready to tell her story, but only with Bella beside her. We need this accommodation, Mike. It's our only shot. The legal precedents were sparse and conflicting. California had recently allowed a therapy dog during the testimony of an 8-year-old sexual assault victim, but that case had been settled. Before appeal, Texas had rejected a similar request, ruling that the emotional impact of the animal's presence outweighed its therapeutic value. Foster knew that Judge Williams, a fair but cautious jurist with 23 years on the bench, would scrutinize every angle before making her decision. At exactly 8 a.m., Foster's assistant knocked on his door. "Judge Williams will see you and Ms. Sullivan in chambers at 10:30, she announced. "She wants to review the motion regarding the therapy dog accommodation before the hearing." Foster gathered his materials, including a thick folder of research compiled by his legal team throughout the sleepless night. They'd found 14 cases nationwide where therapy animals had been permitted in courtrooms, along with extensive documentation from the International Association of Animal-Assisted Therapy supporting the practice. Most importantly, they'd obtained a detailed psychological evaluation from Dr. Chun explaining exactly why Emma's testimony would be impossible without Bella's presence. Judge Patricia Williams' chambers were lined with law books and family photographs, creating an atmosphere of both authority and warmth. At 62, she'd earned respect throughout Arizona's legal community for her careful deliberation and unwavering commitment to justice. She gestured for both attorneys to sit as she reviewed the motion paperwork spread across her mahogany desk. "Counselors," Judge Williams began, her voice measured and thoughtful, "this is uncharted territory for our jurisdiction. Ms. Sullivan, you've argued that allowing this therapy dog would be prejudicial to your client. Please elaborate." Sullivan leaned forward, her expensive suit immaculate despite the early hour. "Your Honor, the prosecution is attempting to parade a sympathetic animal before the jury to compensate for the weakness of their evidence. A 3-year-old child cannot provide reliable testimony under any circumstances, and surrounding her with emotional props only compounds the prejudicial effect. My client has the right to a fair trial based on facts, not manipulation." Foster felt his jaw clench, but maintained his professional composure. "Your Honor, with respect to Ms. Sullivan's position, we're not talking about a prop or manipulation. Dr. Chun's evaluation clearly demonstrates that this child's trauma is so severe that she literally cannot function without her therapeutic support animal. The prosecution seeks only to level the playing field, to allow a crime victim to tell her truth without being re-traumatized by the legal process itself." Judge Williams studied both attorneys carefully before speaking. "Mr. Foster, what safeguards would you propose to address the defense's concerns about prejudicial effect?" Foster had anticipated this question. "Your Honor, we would agree to several conditions. First, Bella would wear no identifying vest or equipment that might draw attention to her therapeutic role. Second, the dog would remain completely out of the jury's sightlines, positioned where only Emma can see her. Third, we would accept a jury instruction explaining that the dog's presence is purely for the witness's comfort and should not be considered evidence. Finally, we would limit Emma's testimony to the essential facts of what she observed, with no emotional embellishment." Sullivan shook her head vigorously. "Your Honor, these proposed safeguards don't address the fundamental issue. The very presence of this animal, regardless of positioning or instructions, will create an atmosphere of sympathy that will cloud the jury's judgment. Furthermore, the reliability of testimony from such a young child remains questionable, therapy dog or not." Judge Williams was quiet for several long minutes, her fingers steepled as she considered the weight of her decision. Outside her window, the Phoenix skyline shimmered in the morning heat, while inside her chambers, the future of a domestic violence case hung in the balance. "I've reviewed the psychological evaluation extensively," she finally said. "Dr. Chun's credentials are impeccable, and her assessment indicates that this child's testimony would be impossible to obtain through conventional methods. However, I'm also acutely aware that this decision will likely be scrutinized on appeal. Foster held his breath as the judge continued. I'm going to allow a compromise. The therapy dog may be present during the child's testimony, but with strict conditions. The animal must remain completely out of the jury's view, positioned behind a screen where only the child can see her. I will provide extensive jury instructions about the accommodation, and I will personally observe the testimony to ensure that the dog's presence doesn't unduly influence the proceedings. Sullivan's face flushed with anger. Your Honor, I respectfully object and will be filing an immediate appeal. That is your right, Counselor, Judge Williams replied calmly. But this child deserves the opportunity to tell her story. And if a therapy dog is what makes that possible, then justice demands we provide that accommodation. Court will convene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. As they left chambers, Foster felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They'd won the battle for Bella's presence, but the war for Emma's testimony and Rivera's conviction was just beginning. The Maricopa County Courthouse stood like a monument to justice against the desert sky, its imposing limestone facade casting long shadows across the plaza as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Inside Courtroom 4B, where tomorrow's proceedings would determine Marcus Rivera's fate, an unusual rehearsal was taking place. The vast chamber, normally filled with the tension of legal battles and the weight of judicial decisions, felt eerily quiet except for the soft clicking of Emma's small shoes against the polished marble floor and the gentle padding of Bella's paws beside her. Emma Rodriguez, dressed in her best purple dress, the color she'd told Bella was her favorite, walked slowly down the center aisle, her tiny hand resting protectively on the golden retriever's head. Her dark hair had been carefully braided by Rosa that morning, adorned with a small butterfly clip that caught the late afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. Despite her grandmother's efforts to make this feel like a special occasion rather than a terrifying ordeal, Emma's steps were hesitant, her brown eyes wide with apprehension as she took in the overwhelming scale of the formal courtroom. Victim. Advocate Lisa Park walked slightly behind them, her heart breaking as she watched this brave little girl prepare to face the most difficult challenge of her young life. Lisa had worked with hundreds of crime victims over her 8-year career, but Emma's case had affected her more deeply than any other. At 34, Lisa was herself a survivor of childhood trauma, which gave her a unique understanding of the courage it took for Emma to take each step forward. You're doing so well, sweetheart, Lisa whispered encouragingly as they approached the witness stand. Remember, tomorrow you'll just be talking to Bella, and all of us grown-ups will listen while you tell her what you saw, just like we've been practicing at Grandma Rosa's house. Dr. Rebecca Chun observed from the gallery, taking detailed notes about Emma's body language and stress responses. The child psychologist had spent countless hours preparing Emma for this moment, using play therapy techniques and gradual exposure to help her build the emotional resilience necessary for testimony. Even so, Chun couldn't shake her concern about the potential trauma of placing such a young child in this intimidating environment, regardless of Bella's comforting presence. Officer Jake Thompson stood near the judge's bench with a measuring tape, working with Court Administrator Jennifer Walsh to determine the exact positioning for tomorrow's unprecedented accommodation. Judge Williams' order had been specific. Bella must remain completely out of the jury's sightline, while still being visible to Emma. They'd spent the morning calculating angles and testing various screen positions to ensure compliance with the court's requirements. How does this look, Emma? Thompson called out as he positioned a movable partition behind the witness chair. Can you see Bella when you sit up there? Emma climbed carefully onto the oversized witness chair, her legs dangling several inches above the floor. The massive leather seat seemed to swallow her tiny frame, making her appear even more vulnerable than usual. But when she looked down and saw Bella's reassuring amber eyes gazing back at her from behind the screen, her posture straightened slightly with newfound determination. "I can see her," Emma announced, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Bella looks happy." Indeed, Bella's tail was wagging gently as she settled into the position she would occupy tomorrow. The golden retriever seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, remaining calm and focused despite the unusual surroundings. Thompson had worked with her extensively over the past week, familiarizing her with courtroom protocols and ensuring she would remain completely still during testimony, regardless of any emotional outbursts or disruptions that might occur. Bailiff Robert Jackson, a 20-year veteran of courtroom security, watched the proceedings with uncharacteristic emotion. Known throughout the courthouse for his stern demeanor and no-nonsense approach to maintaining order, Jackson found himself deeply moved by Emma's bravery. A father of 3 daughters himself, he couldn't imagine how terrifying this experience must be for someone so young. "Miss Emma," Jackson said in the gentlest tone his gruff voice could manage, "tomorrow I'll be sitting right over there, and my job is to make sure everyone in this room is safe and respectful. If you need anything at all, you just look at me, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly, seeming to understand that this intimidating man in uniform was actually on her side. She looked around the courtroom with growing confidence, taking in the American flag hanging near the judge's bench, the rows of wooden benches where people would sit, and the serious-looking box where the jury would listen to her story. "Will the bad man be here tomorrow?" Emma asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her since learning about the trial. Lisa Park exchanged a concerned glance with Dr. Chun before kneeling beside the witness stand. "Yes, sweetheart, Mr. Rivera will be sitting over there with his lawyer," she said, pointing to the defense table while keeping her voice steady and reassuring. "But he can't hurt you or anyone else. See all these nice people here to protect you? Mr. Jackson, Officer Thompson, and Bella will all be right here. And remember, you're helping keep other mommies safe by telling the truth about what you saw." Emma processed this information with the serious concentration of someone far older than her 3 years. She looked down at Bella again, drawing strength from the dog's unwavering presence. "Bella says I'm brave," she announced. "She says telling the truth is important, even when it's scary." Dr. Chun felt tears welling in her eyes as she watched Emma's transformation. The terrified, catatonic child who had arrived at her office just 2 weeks ago was gradually becoming a small but mighty truth-teller, empowered by the unconditional love and support of an extraordinary therapy dog. As the rehearsal continued, Emma practiced speaking into the microphone, learned how to ask for water if her throat got dry, and walked through the basic questions that Prosecutor Foster would ask her tomorrow. With each practice round, her confidence grew incrementally, though the occasional tremor in her voice reminded everyone present of just how much courage this little girl was summoning. When the session finally concluded as evening shadows began to fill the courtroom, Emma walked back down the aisle with noticeably more confidence than she'd shown upon entering. Bella trotted beside her, tail wagging with what looked remarkably like pride in her young charge's progress. "Tomorrow is going to be a big day," Emma told Bella as they reached the courtroom doors. "But we're going to be brave together, aren't we?" Bella's gentle woof seemed to confirm that yes, together they would face whatever tomorrow brought, and together they would ensure that justice prevailed. The morning of Emma's testimony dawned gray and overcast, with storm clouds gathering over Phoenix like an ominous backdrop to the drama about to unfold in courtroom 4B. By 7:30 a.m., a small crowd of reporters had assembled outside the Maricopa County Courthouse, drawn by news of the unprecedented case involving the youngest witness in Arizona's legal history and her therapy dog companion. The media attention had exploded overnight, with headlines reading Toddler and Therapy Dog Make. Legal history and 3-year-old's courage could change court system forever. Inside Rosa Martinez's modest home, the morning routine carried an air of solemn ceremony. Emma sat quietly at the kitchen table, her purple dress pristine and her hair adorned with the same butterfly clip she'd worn during yesterday's rehearsal. She picked at her breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, her appetite diminished by the weight of what lay ahead. Bella lay beside her chair, the golden retriever's usual morning energy subdued, as if she too understood the gravity of the day. "Mia," Rosa whispered, kneeling beside her granddaughter's chair, "your mama called from the hospital this morning. She wanted me to tell you how proud she is of her brave little girl. She said she loves you más que las estrellas more than the stars." Emma's dark eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away with the back of her small hand. "I want Mama to get better," she said quietly. "I want the bad man to go away forever so he can't hurt any more mommies." Officer Thompson arrived. Precisely at 8:15 a.m., his usually confident demeanor tempered by the unusual nature of the day ahead. He'd worked with Bella on hundreds of cases, but none had carried such intense public scrutiny or legal precedent. As he clipped Bella's special courthouse leash to her collar, he noticed that even his veteran therapy dog seemed more alert than usual, her amber eyes reflecting an understanding that today was different from all their previous assignments. The drive to the courthouse was conducted in near silence, with Emma sandwiched safely between Rosa and Lisa Park in the back seat, while Bella rode calmly in the specially configured area Thompson had prepared for her. Emma pressed her face to the window, watching the familiar Phoenix skyline grow larger as they approached the imposing limestone building where her testimony would determine Marcus Rivera's fate. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric with tension and anticipation. Judge Patricia Williams had arrived early to review her notes one final time, acutely aware that her decision to allow Bella's presence would be scrutinized by appellate courts across the nation. Court reporter Margaret Sullivan, the same name. As Rivera's defense attorney, though no relation checked her equipment twice, knowing that every word spoken today would become part of legal history. At exactly 8:45 a.m., Marcus Rivera was escorted into the courtroom by 2 sheriff's deputies, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the formal business attire of the attorneys. At 28, Rivera cut an imposing figure with broad shoulders and cold gray eyes that seemed to search the room for weaknesses to exploit. His defense attorney, Margaret Sullivan, had coached him extensively on courtroom behavior, warning him that any show of intimidation or anger toward the child witness would guarantee his conviction. The jury selection had taken place the previous week, resulting in 12 carefully screened individuals who had sworn they could fairly evaluate the testimony of a 3-year-old witness. Among them sat Maria Santos, a kindergarten teacher who understood child development, Robert Chun, a retired engineer with 4 grandchildren, and Jennifer Walsh, a social worker who had experience with trauma victims. Each had been questioned extensively about their feelings toward therapy animals and their ability to focus on facts rather than emotions. As the courtroom filled with spectators, legal observers, and family members, the tension became almost palpable. Detective Sarah Martinez sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she thought about the weeks of work that had led to this moment. Beside her sat Dr. Rebecca Chun, who had prepared detailed notes about Emma's psychological state and recovery progress, ready to testify if needed about the therapeutic necessity of Bella's presence. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Williams entered the courtroom, her black robes flowing as she took her place behind the bench. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority, "today you will hear testimony from an unusually young witness. This child will be accompanied by a certified therapy dog, whose presence has been determined necessary for the witness's ability to testify. I want to be crystal clear that the dog's presence is purely therapeutic and should not be considered evidence in any way. District Attorney Michael Foster felt his heart racing as he prepared to call Emma to the stand. He'd prosecuted hundreds of cases, but none had ever felt as crucial as this one. The months of preparation, the legal battles, and the unprecedented accommodations had all led to this moment when a 3-year-old girl would either secure justice for her mother or watch her attacker walk free. "Your Honor," Foster announced, his voice steady despite his internal anxiety. "The state calls Emma Rodriguez to the witness stand." The massive courtroom doors opened slowly, and Emma appeared in the doorway, her tiny figure dwarfed by the imposing architecture around her. But she was not alone. Bella walked beside her, the golden retriever's presence radiating calm confidence that seemed to transfer to the small child holding onto her harness. Step by careful step, they made their way down the center aisle, past the watchful eyes of the jury, past the defense table where Rivera sat motionless, and toward the witness stand where truth would finally have its day in court. As Emma climbed into the oversized witness chair, her legs dangling above the floor, Bella settled into her designated position behind the carefully placed screen. The dog was completely invisible to the jury, but perfectly positioned so that Emma could see her reassuring presence whenever she needed strength. Judge Williams leaned forward slightly, her stern judicial demeanor softening as she addressed the smallest witness ever to appear in her courtroom. "Emma, can you tell me your name?" "Emma Maria Rodriguez," came the clear, brave response that would begin one of the most extraordinary testimonies in legal history. The courtroom held its collective breath as Emma Rodriguez settled into the witness chair, her small frame barely visible above the mahogany railing that surrounded the witness stand. Her purple dress rustled softly as she adjusted her position, and her butterfly hair clip caught the morning light streaming through the tall windows. Below her line of sight, Bella lay perfectly still behind the partition, her golden fur and gentle presence serving as an anchor of courage for the frightened child. District Attorney Michael Foster approached the witness stand with measured steps, his 20-year career having taught him the delicate balance required when questioning child witnesses. He'd spent countless hours preparing for this moment, knowing that Emma's testimony would either seal Marcus Rivera's fate or result in a mistrial that could set a dangerous precedent for future cases involving child witnesses. "Emma," Foster began, his voice as gentle as a father speaking to his own daughter, "can you tell us how old you are?" Emma held up 3 tiny fingers, then glanced down at Bella for reassurance before speaking clearly into the microphone. "I'm 3 years old. I'll be 4 after my birthday comes." "That's wonderful, Emma. And can you tell us who you live with?" "I live with my mama, and sometimes we visit Abuela Rosa. She makes the best tamales, and she lets me help roll the masa." Emma's voice grew slightly stronger as she talked about familiar, comforting things, exactly as Dr. Chun had coached her during their preparation sessions. Foster nodded encouragingly. "Emma, I want to ask you about a night when something scary happened at your house. Do you remember that night?" The change in Emma's demeanor was immediate and heartbreaking. Her small shoulders tensed, her grip tightened on the arms of the chair, and her eyes darted quickly to Bella's reassuring presence. The golden retriever, sensing Emma's distress, lifted her head slightly, offering silent support through their connection. "The bad man came to our house," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible despite the microphone. "He was very angry, and he yelled at Mama." Defense attorney Margaret Sullivan started to rise from her chair, preparing to object to the characterization of her client, but Judge Williams' stern glance warned her to remain seated. The judge had made it clear that normal courtroom objections would be handled differently during a child's testimony, prioritizing the witness's emotional state over technical legal procedures. "Emma," Foster continued gently. "Can you tell us what the angry man did?" Emma's breathing became shallow, and tears began to form in her dark eyes. She looked down at Bella again, and the therapy dog seemed to sense exactly what was needed. Bella moved slightly forward, just enough so that Emma could see her entire face, and gave the faintest wag of her tail, a silent message that said, "You're safe, you're brave, and I'm here with you, he ... Emma began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the memory. The courtroom remained absolutely silent, every person present understanding that they were witnessing something extraordinary, child's courage battling against trauma in real time. Judge Williams leaned forward slightly. "Emma, would you like some water? Or would you like to take a little break?" Emma shook her head with surprising determination. "No, I want to tell Bella what happened. She needs to know so she can help other little girls be safe." The shift in Emma's perspective from testifying to adults to confiding in Bella was exactly what Dr. Chun had hoped would occur. The therapeutic relationship allowed Emma to process her trauma while simultaneously providing crucial evidence for the prosecution. "Okay, sweetheart," Foster said, adapting to Emma's needs. "You can tell Bella what you saw that night." Emma turned her entire body toward where Bella lay hidden behind the partition, speaking as if she and the golden retriever were alone in the room. "Bella, the bad man grabbed my mama's arm really hard, and she said, 'Ow,' and asked him to stop. But he didn't stop, Bella. He pushed her against the wall, and she fell down." The jury listened in rapt attention, several members visibly struggling to maintain their composure as they heard the innocent account of such violence. Maria Santos, the kindergarten teacher, pressed her hand to her heart, while retired engineer Robert Chun clenched his fists in barely contained anger. "Then what happened, Emma?" Foster prompted gently. "I hid behind the big couch because I was scared," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger as she maintained her connection with Bella. "The bad man hit my mama with his hands, and she cried. She said, 'Please stop, Marcus. Please don't hurt me.' But he kept hitting her. Mama tried to cover her face, but he was too strong." At the defense table, Marcus Rivera shifted uncomfortably. In his chair, his attorney placing a restraining hand on his arm as his jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. The devastating accuracy of Emma's account was destroying any hope of claiming the encounter had been mutual combat or self-defense. "Emma," Foster said carefully, "did your mama hit the man back?" "No," Emma replied with absolute certainty. "Mama never hits anybody. She says hitting is wrong, and we use our words when we're upset. But the bad man didn't use words. He just hurt her until she stopped moving." The emotional impact of Emma's testimony was overwhelming. Court reporter Jennifer Williams, different from the defense attorney, wiped tears from her eyes while continuing to transcribe every word. Bailiff Robert Jackson, despite his decades of experience with violent crimes, found himself struggling to maintain his professional composure. But Emma wasn't finished. As Foster prepared to conclude his questioning, she turned back toward the courtroom, her voice suddenly carrying a strength that seemed far beyond her 3 years. "Bella told me something important," Emma announced, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the silent courtroom. "She said that when bad things happen to people we love, the bravest thing we can do is tell the truth, even when it's really, really scary." Emma paused, looking directly at the jury with an intensity that made several members lean forward in their seats. "Bella says that little girls like me have to help protect mamas everywhere by making sure bad men can't hurt them anymore. She says even though I'm small, my words are big enough to help keep other families safe." The courtroom erupted in barely suppressed sobs. Juror Maria Santos openly wept, while Robert Chun removed his glasses to wipe his eyes. Even Judge Williams blinked rapidly, struggling to maintain judicial composure in the face of such profound innocence and courage. And Bella told me one more thing, Emma continued, her voice now carrying the unshakable conviction of a child who had found her purpose. She said that when we tell the truth about scary things, we help make the world a little bit safer for everyone. So that's why I'm here today, to help Bella make the world safer. As Emma finished speaking, the silence in the courtroom was absolute, not the uncomfortable quiet of uncertainty, but the reverent hush of people who had just witnessed something miraculous. A 3-year-old girl transforming her trauma into a beacon of hope and justice for others. The jury deliberation lasted exactly 47 minutes, the shortest deliberation in Maricopa County history for a felony domestic violence case. When the 12 men and women filed back into courtroom 4B, their faces carried the weight of what they had witnessed and the certainty of their decision. Foreman Robert Chun, the retired engineer whose own granddaughter was Emma's age, stood with trembling hands as he prepared to deliver a verdict that would echo through legal history. Emma was not present for the verdict reading, having been taken to a quiet family room where she played with Bella while the adults handled the formal conclusion of the legal proceedings. Through the window, she could see news vans lining the street outside the courthouse, their satellite dishes reaching toward the storm clouds that had finally begun to release their burden in gentle rain across Phoenix. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Patricia Williams asked, her voice carrying the formality required by law despite the emotional upheaval that had consumed her courtroom hours earlier. We have, Your Honor, Chun replied, his voice steady despite the tears that had marked his face during Emma's testimony. On the charge of aggravated assault in the first degree, we find the defendant Marcus Rivera guilty. On the charge of domestic violence, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. Marcus Rivera's face remained stone cold as the verdicts were read, but his defense attorney, Margaret Sullivan, slumped slightly in her chair, knowing that Emma's testimony had been impossible to refute or discredit. The 3-year-old's innocent recounting of events had painted such a vivid, incredible picture of the attack that no amount of legal maneuvering could have created reasonable doubt. District Attorney Michael Foster felt a mixture of relief and profound respect for the little girl whose courage had made this moment possible. As the judge scheduled sentencing for the following month, he thought about Emma's words about making the world safer for other families, words that had already begun to transform how the legal system approached child witnesses. 6 weeks later, on a crisp December morning, Judge Williams sentenced Marcus Rivera to 28 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The harsh sentence reflected not only the severity of his crimes, but also the judge's recognition that his actions had traumatized a child whose recovery would take years of careful therapeutic work. By then, Emma had become a symbol of courage throughout Arizona and beyond. Her story had captured national attention, leading to legislative discussions in 12 states about expanding accommodations for child witnesses. The video of her testimony, her face carefully obscured to protect her privacy, had been viewed millions of times, inspiring other young victims to find their voices and other courts to reconsider their policies regarding therapy animals. Maria Rodriguez made a complete physical recovery from her injuries, though the emotional healing took longer. She spent countless hours in therapy with Dr. Rebecca Chun, working through the trauma of the attack and the complex feelings of guilt and gratitude surrounding her daughter's testimony. Emma saved my life in more ways than one, Maria would later tell reporters. Her courage didn't just put my attacker in prison. It showed me that we could survive this and become stronger. The bond between Emma and Bella deepened into something that transcended their original therapeutic relationship. Officer Jake Thompson formally recommended that Bella be permanently assigned to work with Emma for as long as needed, recognizing that their connection had become mutually beneficial. Bella seemed to take pride in her role as Emma's protector and confidence builder, and Emma's presence brought out the therapy dog's most nurturing instincts. 3 months after the trial, Arizona Governor Sarah Martinez signed groundbreaking legislation formerly known as Emma's Law, which established comprehensive protocols for therapy, animal accommodations, and legal proceedings involving child witnesses. The law required courts to provide therapy dogs when recommended by qualified child psychologists and created a state-funded program to train and certify courthouse therapy animals. The signing ceremony took place in the rotunda of the state capitol, with Emma standing proudly beside Governor Martinez, as Bella received a special medal recognizing her service to justice. Emma, now confident enough to speak to small groups, addressed the assembled lawmakers and advocates with words that would be quoted in legal journals for years to come. "Bella taught me that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave," Emma said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "She showed me that when you have someone who loves you standing beside you, you can do hard things to help other people. I hope other little kids who are scared can have their own Bella too. Help them be brave too." Dr. Chun documented Emma's remarkable psychological recovery in a landmark study that was published in the Journal of Child Psychology and later became required reading in graduate programs for victim advocates. Emma's transformation from a traumatized, catatonic child to a confident, articulate advocate for others became a case study in the power of animal-assisted therapy and proper psychological support. 1 year after the trial, Emma started kindergarten at Rose's neighborhood school. On her first day, she walked confidently through the doors, no longer the frightened child who had once cowered in silence. Her teacher, Mrs. Patricia Holmes, later remarked that Emma possessed an unusual empathy for other children who seemed scared or sad, often offering comfort and friendship to classmates who were struggling. Bella continued her work as a courthouse therapy dog, helping dozens of other children find their voices and navigate the difficult process of testifying about traumatic experiences. But every afternoon, she would return to the small house where Rosa still made the best tamales in Phoenix, and Emma would whisper secrets in her ear and tell her about her day at school. On quiet evenings, as Emma practiced reading with Bella lying beside her on Rosa's old sofa, it was hard to imagine that this confident, happy child had once been so broken by trauma that doctors wondered if she would ever speak again. Her recovery stood as a testament to the healing power of love, the importance of believing in children's resilience, and the extraordinary difference that one special dog could make in a little girl's life. Emma's story had indeed made the world a little safer for families everywhere, just as she had promised Bella it would. And in the process, she had discovered that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful messages of hope, courage, and healing.